Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her dress blue uniform one final time before stepping into the bustling Marine Corps base cafeteria. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, casting long shadows across the rows of tables where Marines sat eating breakfast and discussing their upcoming assignments. Maria had been stationed at Camp Pendleton for 3 weeks now, having transferred from her previous posting in North Carolina, and she still felt the weight of curious stares wherever she went. The reason for those stares was impossible to hide, even in her perfectly pressed uniform. 3 jagged scars ran down the left side of her face, starting near her temple and ending just below her jawline. The marks were pale against her olive skin, creating an unmistakable pattern that drew attention whether she wanted it or not. Maria had learned to live with the stares, but what she hadn't expected was the reaction from some of her fellow Marines. "Hey, Scarface," called out Corporal Jake Morrison from across the cafeteria. His voice carried easily over the breakfast chatter, causing several heads to turn in Maria's direction. "Did you run into a blender during basic training?" A few Marines at Morrison's table chuckled, their laughter echoing off the cafeteria walls. Maria felt her jaw tighten, but she kept walking toward the serving line, her military bearing never faltering. She had dealt with comments like this before, though she had hoped things might be different at a new base. "I heard she got those scars in a bar fight," whispered Lance Corporal Tony Rodriguez to his breakfast companions, not bothering to lower his voice enough to prevent Maria from hearing. "Probably couldn't handle her liquor and picked a fight with the wrong person." Maria picked up a tray and moved through the serving line with deliberate precision. She had learned early in her military career that reacting to such comments only encouraged more of them. Instead, she focused on maintaining her composure and letting her work speak for itself. After 8 years in the Marines, she had earned her rank through dedication, skill, and countless hours of training that had pushed her beyond what she thought possible. The truth about her scars was something she rarely shared, and certainly not with Marines who seemed more interested in making jokes than understanding the woman behind the uniform. Those 3 lines on her face represented a night that had changed her life forever, a night when she had made a choice that most people would never have to face. "I bet she got them trying to look tough," added Private First Class Danny Chen, joining the speculation with obvious enjoyment. "Some people will do anything for attention, even scar up their own face." Maria selected her breakfast with steady hands, though inside she felt the familiar burn of frustration. These Marines had no idea what she had been through, no understanding of the circumstances that had led to her injuries. They saw only the surface, the visible reminder of trauma, and felt free to create their own stories about how she had acquired her scars. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual morning energy as Marines prepared for another day of training and duties. Maria found an empty table near the back of the room, hopping to eat her breakfast in peace. She had learned that sitting alone often meant avoiding further comments, though it also meant accepting a certain level of isolation that she had never experienced before her injuries. As she sat down, Maria caught fragments of conversation from nearby tables. Some Marines discussed weekend plans, others complained about upcoming field exercises, and a few continued to speculate about the new staff sergeant with the distinctive scars. She tried to focus on her food, but the whispered comments were hard to ignore. "I wonder if she's even deployment-ready," said Corporal Lisa Park to her table mates. "Those scars look pretty fresh. Maybe she's just hiding out here until she heals up completely." Maria took a measured bite of her eggs, maintaining her composure despite the growing irritation. Park's comment stung particularly because it questioned her readiness for duty, something that Maria had never doubted about herself despite the physical and emotional challenges she had faced. Her medical clearance was complete, her fitness scores were above average, and her performance reviews had consistently rated her as an exemplary Marine. The speculation continued throughout breakfast, with various Marines offering their theories about how she had acquired her scars. Some guessed training accidents, others suggested off-duty incidents, and a few made more creative suggestions that bordered on the ridiculous. None of them approached her directly to ask, preferring instead to create elaborate stories based on nothing more than their own imagination. Maria finished her breakfast and prepared to leave, knowing that her first official day at Camp Pendleton would involve meeting with her new commanding officers and beginning the process of integration into her assigned unit. She had been transferred to work with the base's logistics division, where her experience in supply chain management and personnel coordination would be valuable assets. As she stood to clear her tray, she heard Morrison's voice again, louder this time and clearly intended for her to hear. "Maybe she'll tell us the story someday. I'm betting it involves a lot more crying than she wants to admit." This comment drew more laughter from his table, and Maria felt her patience wearing thin. She had endured similar remarks for months now, and while she had developed thick skin, there were moments when the constant speculation and mockery became difficult to bear. She reminded herself that these Marines didn't know her story, didn't understand what she had been through, and were simply reacting to something unfamiliar. Maria cleared her tray and left the cafeteria with the same measured pace she had maintained throughout breakfast. Outside, the California morning was crisp and clear, with the Pacific Ocean visible in the distance beyond the base boundaries. She took a deep breath and centered herself, preparing mentally for the day ahead. Her first stop was the administrative building, where she would complete her check-in process and receive her specific duty assignments. The building was a standard military structure, efficiently designed and maintained with the attention to detail that characterized all Marine installations. Maria had always appreciated the consistency of military architecture. No matter where she was stationed, certain things remained familiar and predictable. At the reception desk, she presented her orders to a young corporal who processed her paperwork with professional efficiency. The corporal's eyes flickered briefly to her scars, but he maintained his focus on the documents and offered no comments or questions. Maria appreciated his professionalism and made a mental note that not all Marines at the base were like the ones she had encountered in the cafeteria. "Staff Sergeant Santos, you'll be working with Major Williams in the Logistics Division," the corporal informed her, handing back her completed paperwork. "His office is on the second floor, room 2B. He's expecting you at 900 hours. Maria thanked him and made her way upstairs, her boots echoing on the polished floors. The building was busy with Marines going about their various duties, and she received the usual curious glances that had become routine wherever she went. Most people simply looked and moved on, but she noticed a few who nudged their companions and whispered comments she couldn't quite hear. Major Williams' office was clearly marked, and Maria knocked firmly on the door before entering when called. The major was a tall, lean man in his early 40s with graying hair and the weathered appearance of someone who had spent significant time in the field. His office was organized with military precision, and the walls displayed various commendations and unit photographs from his years of service. "Staff Sergeant Santos, welcome to Camp Pendleton," Major Williams said, rising from his desk to shake her hand. His grip was firm and his eye contact was direct and professional. "I've reviewed your file and I'm impressed by your experience in logistics coordination. We can certainly use someone with your background." Maria felt a sense of relief at the major's straightforward approach. He had clearly noticed her scars, but chose not to comment on them, focusing instead on her qualifications and the work they would be doing together. This was the kind of professional interaction she had hoped for when transferring to a new base. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to contributing to the division's mission," Maria replied, maintaining the formal tone appropriate for their first meeting. Major Williams gestured for her to take a seat and spent the next hour discussing her role within the logistics division, the current projects they were managing, and the expectations for her position. Maria found herself impressed by the scope of operations at Camp Pendleton and the complexity of coordinating supplies and personnel for such a large installation. During their discussion, the major mentioned that she would be working closely with several other staff sergeants and junior officers, some of whom she might have encountered already during her time on base. He also explained that there would be a division meeting later in the week where she would be formally introduced to the entire team. "I should mention," Major Williams said toward the end of their meeting, "that we maintain high standards of professionalism in this division. Every Marine is expected to treat their colleagues with respect and focus on the mission rather than personal speculation or gossip." Maria wondered if the major had somehow heard about the comments in the cafeteria, or if this was simply his standard speech for new personnel. Either way, she appreciated the emphasis on professionalism and hoped it reflected the overall culture within the logistics division. After completing her meeting with Major Williams, Maria spent the rest of the morning familiarizing herself with the layout of the logistics facilities and meeting some of the civilian contractors who worked alongside the Marines in various support roles. She found the work environment to be generally professional, though she still encountered the occasional curious stare or whispered comment about her appearance. Lunch brought another trip to the cafeteria, and Maria noticed that word about the new staff sergeant with the scars had spread throughout the base. More Marines seemed aware of her presence, and the speculation had evolved into increasingly elaborate theories about how she had acquired her injuries. She overheard suggestions ranging from combat wounds to training accidents to completely fabricated stories that bore no resemblance to reality. "I heard she was in a helicopter crash," one Marine told his companions as Maria passed their table. "Probably the only survivor, which would explain why she's so serious all the time." Another group speculated that she had been involved in some kind of classified mission that had gone wrong, leading to her injuries and subsequent transfer to a stateside posting. The creativity of their theories might have been amusing if they weren't creating a false narrative about her life and service. Maria chose a different table for lunch, hopping to avoid some of the attention, but found that her presence continued to generate interest regardless of where she sat. She began to wonder if transferring to Camp Pendleton had been the right decision, or if she would simply face the same challenges here that she had encountered at her previous base. The afternoon brought her first hands-on work with the logistics systems at Camp Pendleton. Maria threw herself into learning the computer systems, inventory procedures, and coordination protocols that govern the base's supply operations. She found the work engaging and appreciated the opportunity to focus on something other than the constant speculation about her appearance. Her supervisor for the afternoon training was Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Lee, a veteran Marine with 15 years of experience in logistics operations. Lee was professional and thorough in her explanations, and Maria found her to be an excellent teacher who clearly took pride in the efficiency of her department. "The key to successful logistics," Lee explained as they reviewed inventory databases, "is anticipating needs before they become urgent. We track usage patterns, seasonal variations, and training schedules to ensure that supplies are available when and where they're needed." Maria absorbed the information eagerly, asking pertinent questions and demonstrating her understanding of the complex systems involved in keeping a major military installation properly supplied. Lee seemed impressed by her quick grasp of the procedures and her ability to identify potential improvements in the current systems. As the workday neared its end, Maria felt a sense of accomplishment from her productive afternoon. Despite the morning's challenges with speculation and comments about her scars, she had managed to focus on her professional responsibilities and make meaningful progress in understanding her new role. The evening meal brought another trip to the cafeteria, and Maria noticed that the rumors and speculation had continued to evolve throughout the day. She overheard new theories about her background, her previous assignments, and the circumstances surrounding her transfer to Camp Pendleton. None of the speculation came close to the truth about her scars or the events that had led to her current assignment. As she prepared to leave the cafeteria after dinner, Maria overheard a conversation that made her pause. A group of Marines was discussing an upcoming visit from a high-ranking general who would be conducting an inspection tour of the base. The visit was scheduled for the following week, and various units were preparing for the increased scrutiny that always accompanied such visits. "General Patterson is supposed to be pretty tough," one Marine commented. "I heard he doesn't tolerate any nonsense and expects everything to be perfect when he conducts his inspections." Maria made a mental note of this information, knowing that the logistics division would likely face particular scrutiny during the general's visit. Supply operations were often a focus area for high-ranking officials who wanted to ensure that resources were being managed efficiently and effectively. That evening, alone in her quarters, Maria reflected on her first full day at Camp Pendleton. The professional aspects of her transfer had gone well, with productive meetings and training sessions that demonstrated the quality of the Marines she would be working with in the logistics division. However, the personal challenges of dealing with constant speculation and commentary about her scars remained a significant source of stress. She looked at herself in the small mirror above her sink, studying the 3 scars that had become such a defining feature of her appearance. In the privacy of her quarters, she allowed herself to remember the night when these marks had been created, the circumstances that had led to her injuries, and the choice she had made that few people would ever understand. The truth about her scars was not something she shared casually, if at all. It involved events that were deeply personal and profoundly meaningful, events that had tested her courage and commitment in ways that most people would never experience. The speculation and jokes from other Marines stung not because they were cruel, but because they trivialized something that represented the most important decision she had ever made. Maria touched the scars gently, remembering the pain and the fear, but also the determination and the love that had driven her actions that night. These marks were not symbols of weakness or carelessness, as some of the Marines seemed to believe. They were reminders of strength, of sacrifice, and of the willingness to put others before herself when it mattered most. As she prepared for bed, Maria resolved to continue focusing on her professional responsibilities while hoping that eventually, the novelty of her appearance would fade and the speculation would diminish. She had no intention of sharing her story with Marines who seemed more interested in entertainment than understanding, but she hoped that her work performance would eventually speak louder than the rumors and theories that currently surrounded her presence at Camp Pendleton. The base grew quiet as evening turned to night, and Maria fell asleep to the familiar sounds of a military installation settling into its nighttime routine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself as a Marine worthy of respect, regardless of the scars that marked her face and the story they represented. Little did she know that the upcoming visit from General Patterson would provide an opportunity for the truth about her scars to finally emerge, and that the same Marines who had spent days speculating about her appearance would soon learn the extraordinary story behind the marks that had made her the subject of so much curiosity and misguided humor. The remainder of Maria's first week at Camp Pendleton followed a predictable pattern. Her days were filled with productive work in the logistics division, where she quickly established herself as a competent and dedicated Marine. Major Williams had assigned her to oversee the coordination of supply deliveries for the base's training operations, a responsibility that required careful attention to detail and the ability to anticipate the needs of various units engaged in different types of exercises. Maria excelled in this role, drawing on her previous experience to streamline processes and improve efficiency. She developed new tracking systems for high-priority items, created better communication protocols between the logistics division and field units, and identified several areas where costs could be reduced without compromising operational effectiveness. Her colleagues in the division began to appreciate her contributions, and the professional atmosphere that Major Williams had promised proved to be genuine. However, the situation in other areas of the base remained challenging. The cafeteria continued to be a source of unwanted attention, with Marines speculating about her background and making comments about her appearance. The stories had grown more elaborate over the course of the week, with some Marines now claiming to have insider information about her previous assignments and the circumstances surrounding her transfer. "I heard she was involved in some kind of classified operation that went bad," Corporal Morrison told a new group of listeners during Thursday's lunch. "That's why she got transferred here so quietly. They're keeping her out of the way until the heat dies down." Lance Corporal Rodriguez had developed his own theory, which he shared with anyone willing to listen. "My buddy at Quantico says she was caught in an explosion during a training exercise. Probably her own fault for not following safety protocols. That's why she doesn't want to talk about it." Maria had learned to tune out most of these conversations, but the persistence of the speculation was wearing on her patience. She had hoped that after a few days, the novelty of her presence would fade and Marines would find other topics to discuss. Instead, the rumors seemed to be gaining momentum, with new details being added daily to the growing mythology surrounding her scars. The situation became more complicated when some of the speculation began to focus on her competence as a Marine. While her work in the logistics division spoke for itself, Marines who only saw her in passing began to question whether someone with visible injuries should be in a leadership position. These doubts were particularly painful for Maria because they struck at the core of her identity as a professional military officer. "I don't know why they put someone like that in charge of supply operations," Private Chen commented to his friends during Thursday evening's dinner. "How do we know she can handle the pressure if something goes wrong? Those scars suggest she's already had problems managing dangerous situations." This type of comment was especially frustrating because it revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of both her capabilities and the circumstances that had led to her injuries. Maria had never failed in a leadership position, had never been found wanting in dangerous situations, and had consistently performed at the highest levels throughout her military career. The suggestion that her scars indicated incompetence was not only wrong, but deeply insulting to everything she had accomplished. Friday brought news that would change the dynamics at Camp Pendleton significantly. General Patterson's inspection visit had been moved up by several days, and he would now be arriving on Monday morning for a comprehensive review of base operations. The announcement sent ripples of activity throughout the installation as various departments prepared for the increased scrutiny that always accompanied high-level visits. Major Williams called a special meeting of the Logistics Division to discuss preparations for the General's inspection. The meeting included all of the division's officers and senior enlisted personnel, giving Maria her first opportunity to interact formally with the broader team she would be working with during her assignment at Camp Pendleton. General Patterson has a reputation for being thorough and demanding, Major Williams explained to the assembled group. He'll want to see detailed reports on our inventory levels, supply chain efficiency, and coordination with operational units. I'm confident that our division will represent the base well, but I want everyone to review their areas of responsibility and ensure that all documentation is current and accurate. The major assigned specific preparation tasks to each member of the team, and Maria found herself responsible for compiling reports on the supply coordination improvements she had implemented during her first week. This assignment was both an opportunity to showcase her contributions and a potential source of pressure, given that her work would be directly reviewed by a general officer. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, who had been with the Logistics Division for 2 years, offered to help Maria prepare her reports. Thompson was one of the Marines who had maintained a professional attitude toward her from the beginning, focusing on her work rather than speculating about her appearance. The General likes to see concrete examples of improvement and innovation, Thompson advised as they worked together Friday afternoon. Your new tracking system for priority items is exactly the kind of thing that will impress him. Make sure you have specific data showing how it's improved response times and reduced waste. Maria appreciated Thompson's guidance and found herself grateful for his professional approach to their working relationship. Unlike many of the Marines she encountered in other areas of the base, Thompson seemed genuinely interested in helping her succeed in her new position rather than creating entertainment from her personal circumstances. As they worked on preparing the reports, Thompson mentioned that General Patterson was known for conducting impromptu interviews with Marines at all levels during his inspections. He might pull any of us aside for questions, Thompson warned. He likes to get a sense of how well units work together and whether there are any underlying issues that aren't reflected in official reports. This information made Maria slightly nervous, not because she was unprepared to discuss her work, but because she wondered if the general might have heard rumors about the speculation surrounding her presence at the base. While she was confident in her professional performance, she worried that the constant chatter about her scars might have reached higher levels of command. The weekend provided a brief respite from the pressure of preparing for the inspection, but it also gave Maria time to reflect on her situation at Camp Pendleton. She had been at the base for exactly 1 week, and while her professional integration had gone smoothly, the social challenges remained significant. The constant speculation about her appearance was affecting her ability to feel truly settled in her new environment. Saturday morning brought an unexpected encounter that would prove to be significant in the days ahead. Maria was completing her weekly fitness test on the base's running track when she noticed a small group of Marines helping an elderly civilian who had apparently fallen while walking near the base perimeter. The man appeared to be injured and was having difficulty standing. Without hesitation, Maria left the track and approached the group to offer assistance. Her medical training, which all Marines received but which she had supplemented with additional emergency response courses, immediately kicked in as she assessed the situation. "What happened?" she asked the Marines who were already trying to help the man. "He was walking his dog and tripped on some uneven pavement," explained Corporal Sarah Martinez. "I think he might have hurt his leg pretty badly. We were about to call for medical assistance." Maria knelt beside the elderly man and introduced herself, speaking in calm, reassuring tones as she began to evaluate his condition. The man, who appeared to be in his 70s, was clearly in pain and seemed disoriented from the fall. His dog, a small terrier, was packing anxiously nearby. "Sir, my name is Staff Sergeant Santos, and I'm going to help you," Maria said gently. "Can you tell me your name and where you're feeling pain?" The man identified himself as Robert Chen, father of Private Danny Chen, and explained that he had been walking the family dog when he lost his footing. Maria quickly determined that he had likely suffered a sprained ankle and possibly a mild concussion from hitting his head when he fell. While Corporal Martinez called for medical assistance, Maria used her uniform blouse to create a makeshift pillow for Mr. Chen's head and began monitoring his vital signs. Her calm professionalism and obvious competence impressed the other Marines who had gathered to help, and word of her quick response began to spread among the growing crowd. "She really knows what she's doing," one of the Marines commented to his companion. "Look how she's handling the situation. That's definitely someone with real medical training." As they waited for the base medical team to arrive, Maria continued to monitor Mr. Chen's condition and keep him calm. She asked him questions about his military service, which she had correctly guessed from his bearing and the way he spoke about his son's career in the Marines. This conversation served both to keep him alert and to distract him from his pain. "I served in Vietnam," Mr. Chen told her, his voice gaining strength as he spoke about his experiences. "Army Infantry, 2 Tour. Danny is my youngest son, and I'm so proud that he chose to serve too, even if he picked the Marines instead of the Army." Maria smiled at this comment and continued to engage him in conversation while maintaining her medical monitoring. She learned that Mr. Chen visited the base regularly to walk his dog and sometimes to watch his son during training exercises. This information would prove to be important in the days ahead, though Maria had no way of knowing it at the time. The base medical team arrived within 10 minutes and took over care for Mr. Chen. The lead medic, Hospital Corpsman First Class Jennifer Walsh, was impressed by Maria's initial assessment and the care she had provided while waiting for professional medical assistance. "You did an excellent job stabilizing him and keeping him calm," Walsh told Maria as they transferred Mr. Chen to a stretcher. "Your assessment was right on target. He's got a sprained ankle and a mild concussion, but nothing more serious. Good work, Staff Sergeant." As Mr. Chen was being prepared for transport to the base medical facility, he grabbed Maria's hand and looked directly at her scars for the first time since their encounter began. Rather than the curiosity or speculation she had grown accustomed to, she saw understanding and recognition in his eyes. "Thank you for helping me," Mr. Chen said quietly. "I can see that you're someone who knows about taking care of people, probably from personal experience. Danny has been telling me about some Marines making jokes about a new staff sergeant. I hope you know that not everyone judges people by their appearance." This comment surprised Maria, both because it revealed that word of the speculation about her had reached even the families of Marines on base, and because Mr. Chen seemed to understand something about her character that went beyond the surface judgments others had made. After Mr. Chen was taken to the medical facility, several of the Marines who had witnessed Maria's response began to reconsider their assumptions about the new staff sergeant with the distinctive scars. Corporal Martinez, in particular, seemed struck by Maria's competence and professionalism during the emergency. "I've been hearing all these rumors about how she got those scars," Martinez told the other Marines who had helped with Mr. Chen. "But watching how she handled this situation, I'm thinking maybe we don't know the real story. Someone with that level of medical training and that calm under pressure has probably seen some serious situations." This observation would prove to be the beginning of a shift in how some Marines at Camp Pendleton viewed Maria, though the majority of the speculation and commentary would continue unchanged until the events of the following week brought the truth to light. Sunday passed quietly, with Maria using the time to put finishing touches on her preparation for General Patterson's inspection. She reviewed her reports multiple times, ensured that all her documentation was thorough and accurate, and mentally prepared for the possibility of being interviewed by the general about her work with the Logistics Division. That evening, as she completed her final preparations, Maria reflected on the week that had passed and the challenges that lay ahead. The encounter with Mr. Chen had reminded her that not everyone was quick to judge based on appearances, and that her actions and character were more important than the speculation that surrounded her presence at the base. However, she also knew that the upcoming inspection would bring increased visibility and potentially more scrutiny of her background. General Patterson was known for his attention to detail and his interest in understanding the personnel under his command. If he had heard any of the rumors about her, there was a good chance he would want to know the truth about her circumstances. As she fell asleep Sunday night, Maria had no way of knowing that the next day would bring an encounter that would finally reveal the true story behind her scars, and that the same Marines who had spent a week speculating about her background would soon learn the extraordinary circumstances that had led to her injuries and her transfer to Camp Pendleton. The truth was far more remarkable than any of the theories they had created, involving a level of courage and sacrifice that most people would never be called upon to demonstrate. But for now, that truth remained hidden behind the professional demeanor and quiet competence that Maria had maintained throughout her first week at her new duty station. Monday morning would change everything, beginning with a chance encounter that would set in motion a series of events leading to the revelation of Maria's story and a fundamental shift in how she was perceived by the Marines of Camp Pendleton. The inspection that everyone was preparing for would become secondary to a much more important recognition of heroism and sacrifice that had gone unacknowledged for far too long. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency that characterized all major military inspections. General Patterson's convoy arrived at Camp Pendleton precisely at 800 hours, and the base immediately shifted into the heightened state of readiness that accompanied high-level visits. Marines moved with purpose throughout the installation, ensuring that every detail met the exacting standards expected during such reviews. Maria had arrived at the Logistics Division offices an hour early to conduct final reviews of her reports and prepare for what would likely be a demanding day. Her documentation was thorough and professional, reflecting both her natural attention to detail and the additional effort she had invested in preparing for this inspection. The improvements she had implemented during her first week were well documented and supported by concrete data showing measurable benefits to operational efficiency. Major Williams gathered the logistics team for a final briefing before the general's arrival at their facility. "Remember, the general will be evaluating not just our systems and procedures, but our professionalism and readiness," he reminded them. "Staff Sergeant Santos, since you're our newest team member, be prepared to discuss the improvements you've implemented and how they integrate with our existing operations." The morning's first phase of inspection focused on administrative reviews and facility tour. General Patterson, a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had commanded respect throughout a long military career, moved through the base with methodical precision. His questions were direct and well-informed, revealing a deep understanding of military logistics and operations. Maria's first direct interaction with the general came during his review of the Logistics Division's supply coordination systems. General Patterson examined her reports with careful attention, asking pointed questions about implementation timelines, cost savings projections, and integration with existing protocols. "Staff Sergeant Santos, these efficiency improvements are impressive for someone who's been here only a week," the general observed, looking up from her documentation. "Your background must include significant experience in logistics optimization." "Thank you, sir. I've had opportunities to work on similar projects at previous assignments, and I was able to adapt those experiences to the specific needs here at Camp Pendleton," Maria replied, maintaining the professional tone appropriate for the situation. The general's eyes briefly registered the scars on her face, but his expression remained neutral and focused on her professional qualifications. This reaction was a relief to Maria, who had been concerned that he might have heard some of the speculation that had circulated throughout the base during her first week. After completing his review of the logistics operations, General Patterson moved on to other areas of the base. The inspection was proceeding smoothly, and Maria began to feel confident that her part in the review had gone well. Her reports had been well received, her answers to the general's questions had been thorough and professional, and she had successfully demonstrated her value to the Logistics Division. However, the day took an unexpected turn during the general's lunch break. Rather than eating in the officers' dining facility as originally planned, General Patterson decided to visit the main cafeteria to interact with Marines at all levels and get a sense of base morale. This decision would prove to be the catalyst for events that no one had anticipated. The cafeteria was buzzing with its usual lunchtime energy when the general entered, accompanied by Colonel Harris, the base commanding officer, and several other senior staff members. Their presence immediately elevated the atmosphere, with Marines throughout the facility becoming more attentive to their behavior and conversations. General Patterson had a reputation for engaging directly with enlisted personnel during his inspections, believing that the perspectives of junior Marines often provided valuable insights into unit effectiveness and morale. He moved through the cafeteria systematically, stopping at various tables to ask questions and listen to Marines discuss their experiences and observations. It was during one of these conversations that the topic of Maria's scars first came to the general's attention. He had stopped at a table where several Marines were eating lunch, including Corporal Morrison and Lance Corporal Rodriguez, who had been among the most active participants in the speculation about Maria's background. "How are things going here at Camp Pendleton?" the general asked the group, settling into the kind of informal conversation that characterized his inspection style. "Very well, sir," Morrison replied. "The training has been excellent and the facilities are top-notch. We've had some interesting new personnel assignments recently." Rodriguez, emboldened by Morrison's comment, decided to share what he considered to be an amusing observation. "Sir, we've got a new staff sergeant in logistics who has some pretty dramatic scars on her face. The whole base has been trying to figure out how she got them. Some of the theories have been pretty creative." General Patterson's expression shifted slightly, becoming more focused and attentive. "What kind of theories?" he asked, his tone remaining conversational but taking on a quality that suggested increased interest. Morrison, not recognizing the change in the general's demeanor, continued enthusiastically. "Everything from bar fights to training accidents. Some people think she was in some kind of classified operation that went wrong. The scars are pretty noticeable, so everyone's been curious about the story behind them." "She doesn't seem to want to talk about it," added Private Chen, who had joined the conversation. "Pretty much keeps to herself and focuses on her work, but those scars definitely make you wonder what happened to her." General Patterson listened to these comments with growing attention, his expression becoming more serious as the Marines continued their speculation. After a few more minutes of conversation, he excused himself from the table and continued his tour of the cafeteria, but his demeanor had clearly changed. Colonel Harris, who had been observing the interaction, noticed the shift in the general's mood. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked as they moved to another section of the cafeteria. "Tell me about Staff Sergeant Maria Santos," General Patterson said quietly, his voice carrying a tone that suggested the question was more than casual curiosity. Colonel Harris consulted the personnel roster he carried during inspections. "She transferred here from Camp Lejeune about a week ago, logistics specialist with an excellent service record. Major Williams speaks very highly of her work so far. Why do you ask, sir?" Before the general could respond, they were interrupted by an announcement over the base public address system. "General Patterson, please report to the main gate immediately. General Patterson to the main gate." The unexpected summons broke the general's concentration, and he quickly made his way to the main gate with Colonel Harris and his security detail. Upon arriving, they found a situation that would provide the key to understanding Maria's story. Mr. Chen, the elderly man whom Maria had helped on Saturday, was at the gate requesting permission to speak with General Patterson. He was accompanied by his son, Private Danny Chen, and appeared to be quite determined to deliver a message to the general personally. "Sir, my father insisted on coming to see you," Private Chen explained to the general. "He said it was important and couldn't wait." General Patterson, intrigued by the unusual request, agreed to hear what Mr. Chen had to say. The elderly man, walking with the aid of crutches due to his sprained ankle, approached the general with the dignity and bearing that reflected his own military service many years earlier. "General, my name is Robert Chen, and I'm a Vietnam veteran. I wanted to thank you personally for the quality of Marines you have serving at this base, particularly Staff Sergeant Maria Santos," Mr. Chen began. The mention of Maria's name immediately caught the general's attention, especially given the conversation he had just had in the cafeteria. "What can you tell me about Staff Sergeant Santos, Mr. Chen?" Mr. Chen proceeded to describe the incident on Saturday when he had fallen and been helped by Maria. He spoke about her immediate response, her medical competence, and her professional demeanor throughout the emergency. But then he shared something that would prove to be far more significant. "General, while she was treating me, I noticed the scars on her face. At first, I thought they looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I might have seen her before. It wasn't until I got home and talked to my wife that I remembered where I had seen those scars." The general waited patiently as Mr. Chen gathered his thoughts, sensing that this conversation was leading to something important. About 18 months ago, my wife and I were driving home from visiting our daughter in San Diego. We were on Interstate 5 when we came across a terrible car accident. A family's car had gone off the road and caught fire. There were people trapped inside, and the first responders hadn't arrived yet. Mr. Chen paused, his voice becoming emotional as he recalled the traumatic scene. There was a young woman in a Marine uniform who was already at the scene, trying to get the family out of the burning car. She went back into that fire 3 times to pull people out. On the third trip, part of the car's frame collapsed and caught her across the face, but she didn't stop until she had gotten everyone to safety. General Patterson felt a chill of recognition as Mr. Chen continued his story. My wife and I were too shaken to do much more than call 911, but we watched this Marine risk her life repeatedly to save a family she didn't even know. The local news covered the story for a few days, calling her a hero. But when we tried to find out more about her later, we discovered that she had requested that her name not be released to the media. Mr. Chen looked directly at General Patterson as he finished his account. General, I'm absolutely certain that Staff Sergeant Santos is the same Marine who saved that family. Those scars on her face match exactly what I remember from that night. She's a genuine hero, and I thought you should know that some of your Marines have been making jokes about the wounds she received while saving innocent lives. The impact of this revelation on General Patterson was immediate and profound. As Mr. Chen spoke, the general began to recall the incident that had been described. While the Marine's identity had indeed been kept confidential at her request, the heroic actions had been reported through military channels, and General Patterson remembered reading about the extraordinary courage displayed by a young staff sergeant who had risked her life to save civilians. Mr. Chen, are you absolutely certain about this identification? The general asked, though his tone suggested he already believed the account. Completely certain, sir. Those scars are distinctive, and I'll never forget what I saw that night. That woman is a hero, and she deserves to be recognized as such rather than being the subject of gossip and speculation. General Patterson thanked Mr. Chen for bringing this information to his attention and arranged for him and his son to be escorted back to their vehicle. As they left, the general turned to Colonel Harris with an expression that reflected both anger at what he had learned and determination to address the situation. Colonel, I want Staff Sergeant Santos brought to my office immediately, the general ordered. And I want the Marines who were speculating about her scars in the cafeteria to be present as well. It's time for this base to learn the truth about one of the finest Marines I've ever had the privilege to know about. Colonel Harris, recognizing the seriousness of the general's tone, immediately dispatched personnel to locate Maria and the Marines who had been involved in the cafeteria conversation. Within 30 minutes, they were all assembled in the base conference room, unsure of what to expect but clearly aware that something significant was about to happen. Maria entered the conference room with growing concern, wondering if her performance during the inspection had somehow fallen short of expectations. The presence of Morrison, Rodriguez, Chen, and several other Marines who had been vocal in their speculation about her appearance added to her confusion about the purpose of the meeting. General Patterson entered the room with an expression of barely controlled emotion, carrying a folder that contained documents related to the highway incident that Mr. Chen had described. The assembled Marines came to attention as he took his position at the head of the conference table. "Be seated," the general commanded, his voice carrying an authority that immediately focused everyone's attention. "I've called this meeting to address a situation that has come to my attention regarding Staff Sergeant Santos and the unprofessional speculation that has been circulating about her appearance." Maria felt her stomach tighten as she realized that the general had somehow learned about the comments and theories that had been circulating throughout the base. She prepared herself for what she assumed would be a lecture about maintaining unit cohesion and avoiding gossip that could affect morale. However, General Patterson's next words would shock everyone in the room and forever change how Maria was perceived by the Marines of Camp Pendleton. Before we proceed, I want to share with you the true story behind Staff Sergeant Santos' scars and explain to you why your speculation and jokes represent a profound disrespect to one of the most heroic Marines it has ever been my privilege to learn about. The general opened his folder and began to read from the official report of the highway incident, his voice carrying the weight of military authority as he described Maria's actions on that night 18 months earlier. As he spoke, the Marines in the room began to understand that they had been making jokes about wounds received in an act of extraordinary heroism, and that their new colleague was not someone to be mocked, but someone to be honored and respected. The revelation was about to transform not only how these Marines viewed Maria, but how the entire base would come to understand the true character of the quiet staff sergeant, whose scars told a story of courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to risk everything to save the lives of strangers. General Patterson's voice filled the conference room with military precision as he began reading from the official incident report, each word carrying the weight of documented fact, rather than the speculation that had circulated among the Marines for the past week. On the evening of March 15, 2024, at approximately 21:30 hours, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos of the United States Marine Corps was traveling northbound on Interstate 5 near San Clemente, California, when she encountered a serious motor vehicle accident involving a family of 4 whose vehicle had left the roadway and caught fire. The Marines in the room sat in stunned silence as the general continued reading, the formal language of the military report providing stark contrast to the casual jokes and theories they had been sharing about Maria's scars. Maria herself felt a mixture of surprise and apprehension as her most private trauma was being revealed to colleagues who had shown little interest in understanding the truth behind her appearance. Witnesses reported that Staff Sergeant Santos immediately stopped her personal vehicle and approached the burning car, despite the obvious danger posed by the spreading fire and the risk of explosion. The vehicle contained 2 adults and 2 children, ages 6 and 8, all of whom were trapped inside due to impact damage that had jammed the doors. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair as he began to understand that his jokes about bar fights and training accidents had been directed at someone who had risked her life to save others. The casual entertainment he had derived from speculating about her scars now seemed profoundly inappropriate as he listened to the general describe actual heroic actions. Without regard for her personal safety, Staff Sergeant Santos entered the burning vehicle through the driver's side window, which had been shattered in the accident. She successfully extracted the 6-year-old child and carried him to safety before returning to the vehicle for the 8-year-old, who had been trapped in the back seat by twisted metal from the impact. Rodriguez felt his face burning with shame as he recalled his confident assertions about Maria's scars being the result of her own carelessness or poor decision-making. The reality of her actions was so far removed from his casual theories that he found himself struggling to reconcile the heroic figure being described with the woman he had dismissed as someone seeking attention through her distinctive appearance. General Patterson paused in his reading to look directly at the Marines who had been most vocal in their speculation. After successfully removing both children from the burning vehicle, Staff Sergeant Santos returned a 3rd time to assist the parents, who remained trapped in the front seats. It was during this 3rd entry into the vehicle that a portion of the car's frame, weakened by the fire, collapsed across her face and upper body. The description of Maria's injuries brought absolute silence to the room. The Marines who had made jokes about her scars were beginning to understand that those marks represented wounds received while saving the lives of strangers, and that their casual commentary had been directed at visible reminders of extraordinary courage. Despite suffering significant facial lacerations and smoke inhalation, Staff Sergeant Santos continued her rescue efforts until she had successfully extracted both parents from the vehicle. Medical personnel who arrived on scene reported that her actions undoubtedly saved 4 lives, as the vehicle was completely consumed by fire within minutes of the final rescue. Maria sat quietly as her story was revealed, remembering the heat of the flames, the terror in the children's eyes, and the determination that had driven her to continue returning to the burning car despite her own injuries. She had never discussed these details with anyone at Camp Pendleton, preferring to focus on her professional responsibilities rather than seeking recognition for actions she considered simply part of her duty as a Marine. Private Chen, whose father had been instrumental in bringing this story to light, felt overwhelmed by the realization that he had been making jokes about wounds received by the same Marine who had later helped his father with such professionalism and compassion. The connection between Maria's medical competence during his father's accident and her actions during the highway rescue suddenly became clear. General Patterson closed the official report and opened a second folder containing newspaper clippings and photographs from the incident. The local media covered this story extensively, referring to Staff Sergeant Santos as a hero and crediting her with saving an entire family. However, at her own request, her name was not released to the press, and she declined all requests for interviews or public recognition. The general held up a newspaper photograph taken at the scene, showing Maria being treated by paramedics while the family she had saved stood nearby, clearly emotional and grateful for her intervention. Her face in the photograph was bloodied and marked by the injuries that would become the scars that had generated so much speculation at Camp Pendleton. Staff Sergeant Santos spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from her injuries, then returned to duty without fanfare or any request for special consideration. Her commanding officer recommended her for the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, the highest non-combat decoration for heroism, which she received in a private ceremony at her request. The impact of this revelation on the assembled Marines was profound and immediate. Morrison, who had been the most vocal in making jokes about Maria's appearance, felt physically ill as he realized the cruelty of his comments. Rodriguez sat with his head in his hands, unable to meet Maria's eyes as he processed the reality of what he had been mocking. Maria herself was struggling with having her private trauma exposed to colleagues who had shown so little interest in understanding her as a person. While she appreciated the general's intent to correct the record, she had hoped to leave this part of her past behind when she transferred to Camp Pendleton. General Patterson was not finished with his presentation. He opened a third folder containing Maria's complete service record, including performance evaluations, commendations, and documentation of her professional achievements throughout her Marine Corps career. What you also don't know about Staff Sergeant Santos is that her heroic actions on that highway were not an isolated incident, but rather consistent with a pattern of exceptional service and dedication that has characterized her entire military career, the general continued. He proceeded to read excerpts from her performance evaluations, highlighting her leadership during humanitarian missions, her role in developing improved medical response protocols for her previous unit, and her volunteer work with organizations that provided support to military families dealing with trauma and loss. Staff Sergeant Santos has consistently demonstrated the highest levels of professionalism, courage, and dedication throughout her 8 years of service. Her transfer to Camp Pendleton was requested specifically because of her expertise in logistics coordination and her proven ability to improve operational efficiency. The general's tone became more pointed as he addressed the Marines who had been engaged in speculation about Maria's background. What I find deeply concerning is that Marines under my command have chosen to make entertainment from the visible evidence of heroism, creating fictional stories rather than taking the time to understand the character and accomplishments of a fellow Marine. Morrison finally found the courage to look at Maria, seeing her not as the subject of speculation, but as a fellow Marine who had endured both physical trauma and the additional burden of having her sacrifice misunderstood and mocked by those who should have offered support and respect. The fact that Staff Sergeant Santos has maintained her professionalism and focus on her duties despite the inappropriate commentary about her appearance speaks to her character and her commitment to the Marine Corps values that we all swore to uphold, General Patterson continued. The general then shifted his attention directly to Maria, his tone becoming more personal and respectful. Staff Sergeant Santos, I want to apologize on behalf of the Marine Corps for the treatment you have received at this base. Your courage and sacrifice deserve recognition, not mockery, and I intend to ensure that your story is properly understood and honored. Maria stood at attention as the general addressed her directly. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your words, but I hope we can focus on moving forward and maintaining the professional standards that are expected of all Marines. Her response demonstrated the same grace and professionalism that had characterized her behavior throughout the week of speculation, even as her personal trauma had been exposed to public scrutiny. General Patterson nodded with obvious respect for her composure and her continued focus on the mission rather than personal recognition. The general then turned his attention back to the Marines who had been involved in spreading speculation about Maria's scars. His expression was stern, and his voice carried the authority of someone who would not tolerate further unprofessional behavior. I want each of you to understand that your behavior this past week has fallen far short of the standards expected of United States Marines. You have engaged in gossip and speculation about a fellow Marine rather than taking the time to understand her qualifications and contributions. This stops now. Morrison was the first to respond, standing at attention and addressing both the General and Maria directly. Sir, Staff Sergeant Santos, I want to apologize for my comments and my behavior. I had no right to make jokes about something I didn't understand, and I'm ashamed of how I acted. Rodriguez followed with his own apology, his voice reflecting genuine remorse for his role in the speculation. I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant Santos. My comments were unprofessional and disrespectful, and I have no excuse for my behavior. One by one, the Marines in the room offered their apologies, each acknowledging their failure to maintain the professional standards expected of them and expressing regret for their treatment of a fellow Marine, who deserved their respect rather than their mockery. General Patterson listened to each apology before addressing the group as a whole. These apologies are a start, but I expect to see fundamental changes in how you interact with Staff Sergeant Santos and with all Marines under your command or in your units. The speculation and gossip stops now, and I want to see active efforts to demonstrate the respect and support that all Marines deserve. The General then announced his intention to ensure that Maria's heroic actions were properly recognized within the Marine Corps community. I will be recommending Staff Sergeant Santos for additional recognition of her civilian rescue actions, and I want her story to be shared as an example of the courage and selflessness that represents the best of Marine Corps values. As the meeting concluded, General Patterson asked to speak with Maria privately. After the other Marines had been dismissed, he offered her the opportunity to discuss how she wanted to handle the aftermath of this revelation and what support she might need to continue her duties effectively. Staff Sergeant Santos, I know this has been difficult for you, the General said quietly. Having your personal trauma exposed like this wasn't fair, but I hope you understand that it was necessary to correct the record and ensure that you receive the respect you deserve. Maria nodded, appreciating the General's concern for her welfare. I understand, sir. I just hope we can move forward and focus on the work that needs to be done. The General's respect for Maria's resilience and professionalism was evident as he assured her of his support, and his intention to ensure that her remaining time at Camp Pendleton would be characterized by the professional treatment she deserved. As word of the truth behind Maria's scars spread throughout the base, the Marines of Camp Pendleton began to understand that they had been in the presence of genuine heroism without recognizing it. The transformation in how Maria was perceived would be dramatic and immediate, but it would also serve as a lasting lesson about the importance of understanding and respecting fellow Marines rather than making assumptions based on appearances. The revelation had changed everything, not just for Maria, but for every Marine who had learned the true story behind the scars that had generated so much misguided speculation and inappropriate humor. The aftermath of General Patterson's revelation spread through Camp Pendleton with the speed and intensity that characterizes all significant news in military communities. Within hours of the meeting, Marines throughout the base had heard the true story behind Maria's scars, and the transformation in attitudes was both immediate and profound. Word traveled first through the logistics division, where Maria's colleagues had already developed respect for her professional competence. Major Williams called an impromptu meeting to address the situation and ensure that his team understood the implications of what had been revealed. I want everyone to understand that Staff Sergeant Santos has been dealing with inappropriate speculation about her appearance while maintaining the highest standards of professional performance, Williams told his assembled staff. The fact that she accomplished so much in her first week here, despite facing that kind of environment, speaks to her character and her commitment to our mission. The Major's words reinforced what many in the logistics division had already observed about Maria's work ethic and competence. Staff Sergeant Thompson, who had worked closely with her on inspection preparations, spoke for many of his colleagues when he expressed both admiration for her heroism and regret for not recognizing the unprofessional treatment she had been receiving. I knew she was dealing with comments and speculation, but I had no idea it was about wounds she received saving people's lives, Thompson said. We should have done more to shut down that kind of talk instead of just ignoring it. The ripple effects extended far beyond the logistics division. In the cafeteria where much of the speculation had originated, Marines found themselves confronting their own behavior and the assumptions they had made about their new colleague. The transformation was particularly striking among those who had been most vocal in their theories and jokes. Morrison, who had been the most persistent in making comments about Maria's appearance, struggled with feelings of guilt and shame that went far beyond simple embarrassment. He had spent the previous week making entertainment from wounds that represented extraordinary courage, and the weight of that realization was affecting his sleep and his ability to focus on his duties. "I keep thinking about those kids she saved," Morrison confided to Rodriguez as they worked together on base maintenance duties. "She went back into a burning car 3 times, and I was making jokes about her getting hurt in a bar fight. I don't know how to face her after acting like such an idiot." Rodriguez was dealing with similar feelings, compounded by the knowledge that his father had been the person who ultimately brought Maria's story to General Patterson's attention. "My dad said she saved his life just like she saved that family on the highway. While we were making jokes, she was out there proving what kind of person she really is." The transformation in behavior was not limited to verbal apologies. Marines throughout the base began making concrete efforts to demonstrate their newfound respect and support for Maria. Some approached her directly to express their regret for their previous behavior, while others showed their respect through actions rather than words. Private Chen, motivated by his father's role in revealing Maria's story, took it upon himself to research the details of the highway rescue that had been covered in local media. What he discovered only reinforced his admiration for Maria's courage and his shame over his own previous behavior. The newspaper reports said the car was completely engulfed in flames within 2 minutes of her getting the parents out, Chen shared with a group of Marines during lunch. "The fire department said anyone still inside would have died. She literally saved 4 lives while risking her own." The details that emerged from media coverage and official reports painted an even more complete picture of Maria's heroic actions. Witnesses had described her calm determination as she repeatedly entered the burning vehicle, her ability to communicate effectively with the trapped family members, and her refusal to stop her rescue efforts despite her own injuries. General Patterson, true to his word, initiated formal recognition processes that would ensure Maria's heroism received appropriate military honors. He also took steps to address the broader issues that her treatment at Camp Pendleton had revealed about professional standards and unit cohesion. "This situation has highlighted some concerning gaps in our professional culture," the general told Colonel Harris during a private meeting. "We need to ensure that all Marines understand their responsibility to support their colleagues and maintain appropriate standards of behavior, regardless of personal appearances or backgrounds they don't understand." The general's directive resulted in mandatory training sessions for all personnel at Camp Pendleton focused on professional conduct, unit cohesion, and the importance of supporting fellow Marines rather than engaging in speculation or gossip that could undermine morale and effectiveness. Maria found herself adapting to a dramatically different social environment at the base. Where she had previously encountered curiosity, speculation, and inappropriate comments, she now faced genuine respect, offers of support, and requests for her perspective on various professional matters. The change was perhaps most noticeable in the cafeteria, where her presence was now greeted with respectful nods and genuine attempts at professional conversation, rather than whispered theories and pointed stares. Marines who had previously avoided her table now sought opportunities to interact with her, though she appreciated those who managed to do so without making her heroism the sole focus of conversation. "It's strange how different everything feels now," Maria confided to Gunnery Sergeant Lee during one of their training sessions. "I appreciate the respect, but I also don't want to be defined only by what happened that night on the highway." Lee, who had been one of the few Marines to maintain consistent professionalism toward Maria from the beginning, understood her perspective. "The best way to handle it is to continue being the excellent Marine you've always been. Eventually, people will see the full picture of who you are, not just one incident from your past." This advice proved to be sound as Maria continued to excel in her professional responsibilities. The improvements she had implemented in the logistics division were yielding measurable benefits, and her expertise was increasingly sought by other divisions dealing with supply chain challenges. Major Williams recommended Maria for additional responsibilities that would utilize her leadership skills and logistics expertise. "She's demonstrated exceptional competence under difficult circumstances," he wrote in his evaluation. "Her ability to maintain professionalism while dealing with inappropriate speculation about her background shows the kind of character we want in our senior enlisted personnel." The base newsletter featured an article about Maria's heroic actions, written with her permission and cooperation. The story focused not only on the highway rescue, but also on her broader military career and her contributions to the logistics division at Camp Pendleton. The article helped ensure that her full story became part of the base's institutional knowledge. "Staff Sergeant Santos represents the best of Marine Corps values," the newsletter article concluded. "Her courage in civilian rescue situations and her professionalism in dealing with challenging social circumstances demonstrate the character and competence that make the Marine Corps an elite fighting force." Several months later, the family that Maria had saved from the burning car made contact with Camp Pendleton to express their ongoing gratitude for her actions. Their letter, which was shared with Maria's permission, provided a perspective on the rescue that highlighted details not captured in official reports. "Our children still talk about the Marine lady who saved them from the fire," wrote Sarah Mitchell, the mother of the 2 children Maria had rescued. "They understand that she was hurt while helping them, and they pray for her every night. We wanted her to know that her courage gave us back our lives and our future together as a family." The letter included drawings made by the children, now 8 and 10 years old, showing Maria as a superhero figure rescuing their family from danger. These simple drawings, displayed in the Logistics Division office with Maria's permission, served as powerful reminders of the human impact of her heroic actions. The transformation at Camp Pendleton extended beyond Maria's individual situation to create broader improvements in unit culture and professional standards. The incident had served as a wake-up call about the importance of treating all Marines with dignity and respect, regardless of personal appearances or circumstances that might not be immediately understood. Training programs were enhanced to emphasize professional conduct and the importance of supporting unit cohesion through positive interactions rather than speculation or gossip. Marines were encouraged to make efforts to understand their colleagues as individuals rather than making assumptions based on limited information. This situation taught us all a valuable lesson about the importance of looking beyond appearances and taking the time to understand the people we serve alongside, Colonel Harris noted in his assessment of the base's response to the incident. "It strengthened our unit culture and reinforced our commitment to the values that define the Marine Corps." A year later, Maria was selected for promotion to gunnery sergeant and was chosen to lead a new training program focused on emergency response and civilian assistance. Her experience in both military logistics and emergency rescue made her uniquely qualified to develop protocols that could save lives in various crisis situations. Staff Sergeant Santos has proven herself to be an exceptional leader and an outstanding example of Marine Corps values, wrote General Patterson in his recommendation for her promotion. "Her courage in civilian rescue operations and her professionalism in overcoming social challenges demonstrate the character we need in our senior enlisted leadership." The promotion ceremony was attended by representatives from the family Maria had saved, Mr. Chen and his son Danny, and Marines from throughout Camp Pendleton who had learned to respect and admire her for her complete record of service, rather than focusing solely on the visible reminders of her heroic actions. In her remarks at the promotion ceremony, Maria reflected on the importance of supporting fellow Marines and maintaining professional standards regardless of personal challenges or misunderstandings that might arise. "Every Marine has a story, and most of us have faced challenges that others might not understand," she said. "What matters is how we support each other and maintain our commitment to the mission and the values that define our Corps. I'm grateful to serve alongside Marines who have shown that they can learn, grow, and demonstrate the professionalism that makes our Corps strong." The ceremony marked not just Maria's individual achievement, but the completion of a transformation that had affected the entire base community. The Marines who had once made jokes about her scars now served as examples of how people can recognize their mistakes, make amends, and commit to higher standards of behavior. Morrison, who had been promoted to sergeant during the intervening months, spoke at the ceremony about the lessons he had learned from the experience. Staff Sergeant Santos taught us all about courage, not just the courage to run into a burning car, but the courage to maintain your professionalism when people around you aren't showing you the respect you deserve. The story of Maria's scars had become a defining moment in the history of Camp Pendleton, not just because of the heroism they represented, but because of how the revelation had transformed an entire military community's understanding of respect, professionalism, and the importance of supporting fellow Marines regardless of circumstances that might not be immediately apparent. Years later, new Marines arriving at Camp Pendleton would hear the story of Gunnery Sergeant Maria Santos as part of their orientation, learning about both her heroic actions and the importance of treating all Marines with dignity and respect. Her scars, once the subject of speculation and inappropriate humor, had become symbols of courage, sacrifice, and the transformation that is possible when people commit to understanding and supporting each other. The Marines who had made fun of her wounds had learned that behind those scars lay a story of extraordinary heroism, and in learning that truth, they had discovered something important about themselves and their responsibility to their fellow Marines. It was a lesson that would influence how they treated others for the rest of their military careers and beyond.